Oh, what a lovely warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, what a pleasure to present to you here today my 7 steps to recovery model. It was about 4 years ago when I had a stroke which paralyzed the whole right side of my body and left me unable to walk. And as you can see, I've been blessed with a remarkable recovery. And since then, what I've been doing is training and coaching health professionals in the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, firstly to get an understanding of what great recovery looks like through a patient's eyes, and secondly, to help them get some insight as to what they need to do differently in order to improve the recovery process overall. And what's really, really interesting from your point of view is how this connects to your world, is that the 7 steps that I took, firstly to deal with the fact that I lost half the movement in my body, and secondly to support and drive my recovery process, is not only relevant to stroke recovery, but also to any form of severe health setback or indeed personal setback. And before I came here on Monday, I was presenting as a guest speaker at the University of Oxford to a very specialist nursing group, research nursing group, and it gave me the sense of enormous opportunity, really, from my patient experience, how it could help others. And it would give me an enormous amount of pleasure and honor to feel that you can take away something today that would help other people. So in terms of severe health setback and in terms of severe personal setback, I want you just to take a moment to think about people in your lives. So they may be colleagues, they may be friends, they may be loved ones, who have very suddenly been struck by some health setback or some personal setback. And when you've thought of that person or persons, can you just raise your hand for me so I can just get a sense of, because I want you to kind of travel with me with this journey. And maybe some of you might need a little bit longer to think about that person. And the other thing, of course, is aging parents, again. Suddenly something can happen to our parents and produce a huge impact on our lives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you very simply, and I appreciate that there are many different forms of stroke which I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to keep it really, really simple. So I'm going to tell you about what a stroke is. And then secondly, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me, because I think that would be helpful. And then I'm going to tell you my story. And within my story, the 7 steps will be there. Some of them will be more obvious than others, but others may not be so obvious. So what I'm going to do at the end is summarize the 7 steps for you, so it's nice and clear. And as I go through those 7 steps, I want you to think about that person or persons who you may be able to help. They may need some further help. And here's another question for you. How many people have you seen go through setback and dealt with it really difficult in a really difficult way? It's really hit them and they didn't know what to do. Yeah? So wouldn't it be great to have some practical strategies, tools, and techniques to help them? Okay, could we have slide number 2, please? Oh, sorry, am I supposed to do this myself? Okay, so what is a stroke? A stroke is when blood flow to the brain is prevented, and principally by 2 ways. One, through a clot in the artery, so there's a blockage which prevents the blood flow getting to the brain, or a blood vessel in the brain bursts, again preventing the blood flow. And as the blood flow is prevented, This causes lack of oxygen to the brain and in turn causes brain damage. And with this brain damage, you get the symptoms of paralysis, loss of speech, in some cases loss of sight. Often the symptoms are really debilitating. So if you should ever be in a position where you get a sense that someone is having a stroke, it's so important that they get medical attention immediately. So let me tell you just a little bit about myself. I'm a young, fit man. Say yes. I'm now 58, but I was 55 when I had the stroke. I'm a swimmer. I keep very fit, so I swim most days. I eat really well. At the time, I was a moderate drinker. I don't drink any more. But interestingly enough, from your point of view, my blood pressure has always been normal. My cholesterol has always been good. So to all intents and purposes, I thought of myself as kind of the model person living a really good and healthy life. So if you had, and here's a final thing. When I had my stroke, I was attending a Weight Watchers program, and I was almost down to my ideal body weight. So, I mean, if you think about, following the right things and doing the right things, I really couldn't have done them any better than that. So if you'd asked me the question, would I have ever thought that I had have got a stroke or had any form of severe health setback, then really I would have never thought it possible. So probably at this stage you're asking yourself, so come on, David, what happened? Well, I was working in the garden, and I was digging a hole. And I should just add that physical work and me aren't very good friends. So I was digging this hole rather reluctantly, and I got pins and needles down my right side. And I tried to stamp out these pins and needles. You know when you get pins and needles and you kind of rub your hand and you try and stamp them out? And they wouldn't go away. And then for a moment, it was probably about 30 seconds, I felt very, very unwell and also very scared. It was a very odd sensation, but it only lasted for a very small amount of time. And then I felt okay. And then I carried on. Well, tried to carry on. And then I noticed, it's interesting, my foot did that, it reminded me, but I began to almost walk as if I was sort of half drunk. It was a really sort of strange sensation. And I don't know why I thought this, but I thought that I'd done something to my back. So I rang my wife. I said, look, I'm walking really strangely. So could you take me up to the hospital and just get me checked out? So we got in the car, and it was a really kind of strange, I'm kind of running back this in my head now. And I said to my wife, you don't think I've had a stroke, do you? And she looked at me and she said, have you got a really bad headache? And I said, no, I feel fine. And we were chatting away. We got to hospital. And I went to undo the safety belt with my right hand, and it was completely paralyzed. And what was interesting was that I was almost curious. I kind of went, okay, that's not working. So I leant over with my left hand and undid the safety belt, and then got out of the car, and I could feel the power in my right leg going. So I hung on to my wife for dear life, really hanging. And I could see the sign for the accident and emergency department. And I just said to myself, I can get there. I can do this. I can get there. I can do this. And I could just feel the power going. And it was just a whisker. I just got to the entrance, and my leg went. So they wheeled me into the accident and emergency department, and they were really, really good. But in their earnestness to reassure me, what they did was they started to talk about the stroke being a clot. And with a clot, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, they can use a clot busting procedure called thrombolysis. Is anybody familiar with that? Yeah. So they can literally get rid of the clot. And what this means in terms of the patient is that the movement can come back within several hours. So you can imagine the film that I'm running in my head now. I'm thinking, okay, so I can't walk. I've got no right hand and no right arm. But it's not going to be so bad because within a few hours it's going to be okay. But, and here's the big but, they scanned me and then discovered that it was a bleed. This one. So then they looked at me, or rather I looked at them, and I said, okay, so now what? And they said, well, we've just got to admit you and see what we can do. So this massive cloud of uncertainty fell upon me and my wife, and I'm just, all this stuff's running in my head thinking, well, how long is this going to take, and how long am I going to be like this? And so they wheel me into the ward, and I see this sign at the top which says acute stroke unit. And I'm thinking, acute stroke unit, this is really, really serious. So I lie there in this bay, and I'm so frightened. I'm holding myself like a child, and I'm shaking like crazy. I'm so, so frightened. And then I said to myself, what can I do? I've got to do something. Because every time I asked one of the health people around me, understandably, they didn't know. So I took this, my wife knows I like to write and draw and things like that. So I took this pad and I wrote on this pad, when I wake up, I will feel my right side. When I wake up, I will feel my right side. Just one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. And if nothing more, it just made me feel better. I got this sense of control that I was actually doing something. I could actually do something about the way I was feeling. And then night came. And I don't know if you've ever spent a night in a hospital, but in England, everybody shouts. I don't know why everybody shouts. Is this experience here? Is it the same? Yeah. What is it about hospitals at night that everybody shouts? And every so often I was woken intermittently by my right foot swiveling. It was just making this involuntary movement. And I thought, that's interesting. So when day came, I said to the staff nurse, I said, look, my foot's doing this really strange movement. So she said, well, that's a good sign. It means that some movement is coming back to your limb, to your right limb. So that made me feel better. So then I sat up in the bed and I looked around me. And I will never forget this point of clarity. You know when you're looking across something, and you can see so clearly what is in front of you, and you really get it.